It will not be wrong to say that we, like Jess, are waiting to take more wisdom from this old man. Despite his weak heart, there is no stopping him move, and ultimately he is living a life full of passion and ambition. Let us see what he has to teach us. And something else, Jess, he said, motioning for me to follow him to the upper edge of the clearing. You won't understand until you reach 70. After these years, your time is borrowed. And when you live on that kind of time, something goes back. Something I cannot explain. You go back to the places you knew and loved. See this steep hill slope? He pointed down from the upper rim of the clearing toward the deep valley below. Your mother and I, when she was 19 and I was 22, cleared this mountain slope together. We raised corn, beans, and pumpkins here, he continued, his voice rising with excitement. He talked with his hands too. Those were the days. This wasn't the land one had to build up. It was already here as God has made it, and what we had to do was to clear the trees and burn the bush. I plowed this mountain with cattle the first time it was ever here plowed, and we raised more than a barrel of corn to the shock. That's why I came back up here. I went back to our youth, and this was the only land left like that was. And Jess, he bragged, regardless of my 70 years and 10, I plowed it. Plowed it with a mule. I have, with just a little help, done all the work. It's like the land your mother and I used to farm here when I brought my gun to the field and took home a mess of fox squirrels every evening. I looked at the vast mountain slope below where my mother and father had farmed, and I could remember years later when they farmed this land. It was on this steep slope that my father once made me a little wooden plow. That was when I was 6 years old, and they brought me to the field to thin corn. I lost my little plow in a furrow, and I cried and cried until he made me another plow. But I never loved the second plow as I did the first one. Now, to look at the mountain slope, grown up with tall trees, many of them big enough to have sawed into lumber at the mill. It was hard to believe that my father and mother had cleared this mountain slope and had farmed it for many years. For many of the trees were 60 feet tall, and the wild vines had matted their tops together. And Jess, he almost whispered, the doctors told me to sit still and to take life easy. I couldn't do it. I had to work. I had to go back. I had to smell this rich loam again. This land is not like the land I had to build to grow alfalfa. This is real land. I had to come back and dig in it. I had to smell it, sift it through my fingers again. And I wanted to taste yams, tomatoes, and potatoes grown in this land. From this mountaintop, I looked far in every direction over the rugged hills my father and mother had cleared and farmed corn, maize, and cane. The one slope they hadn't cleared was the one from which my father had cleared his last small patch. I followed him from his clearing in the sky, down a new path toward the deep valley below. But why do you have so many paths coming from the flat up the steep second bluff? I asked. Since he had promised that he would explain this to me later. "Oh yes," he said. "Early last spring, I couldn't climb straight up the steep path. That was when the doctor didn't give me a week to live. I made a longer, easier path so I wouldn't have to do so much climbing." Then, as I got better, he explained, "I made another path that was a little steeper. And as I continued to get better, I made steeper paths." That was one way of knowing I was getting better all the time. I followed him down the path that wound this way and that, 3 times the length of the path we had climbed. That was beautiful, wasn't it? We all deserve to live such a happy and fulfilled life. Let's talk again in the next video and go through the story bit by bit to see what we learned from it.